Alright guys, today we're taking a look again at aircraft carriers, and I want to make this video talking about how much better CVs are now than they were in the past. I've seen a lot of people talking about how brutal new CVs are, and I don't think they're quite understanding what this game used to be like. So here is a game from old CVs, and there's a couple things I want you to take note of. How much influence a CV has on all sides of the map with the old CVs, not just one small area of the map where his single squadron is on the new CVs. Also, take a look at how much strike power there is. This Midway, for example, has 4 strike squadrons, and each one can pretty much deal as much damage as a current squadron can. So yeah, pretty crazy stuff, and massive nerfs have come into play for new CVs. So yeah, it's pretty incredible how powerful these are. So I've seen people bring up that new CVs can set up like portable crossfires with their teammates, and they can do that to any ship on the map. And while that's kind of true of new CVs, it relies on their teammates and their teammates to get good shots on the ship if they decide to turn to dodge your strike. Which is much more dynamic than old CVs where the CV has the entire squadron set up and they can cross drop all over the place, one shot destroyers, all by themselves, with no team play involved at all. So pretty large difference there, I would say. And I think overall, new CVs even deal less damage just per squad and per strike overall. Something else people bring up is how difficult it is to dodge a drop from new CVs. And I just want you to just take note of some of these drops that are going to happen this game and just see if there's really any option for the enemy ship to dodge at all. New CVs are far easier to dodge because you only have one squad to worry about. So you just turn away or turn into it, and you've basically mitigated most of the damage. Pretty simple to do overall. And a Midway, it doesn't even have the most strikes overall, right? Like there's some other CVs that have way more strike squadron, and there you can see right away, boom, Shimakaze gone. Notice how fast the drops come out too. New CVs have a lot more prep time to get their strike going, whereas here it's just point and click. So definitely a good change by Wargaming for new CVs overall. Yeah, now I've heard some people talk a little bit about how anti-aircraft was way better back in the day, and how new anti-aircraft is basically useless all the time. That's crazy, man, because old AA was just super binary. If you had defensive fire up on an AA ship, it would shoot down all the planes right away. And if you didn't, you're just dead. You couldn't really do much at all. So new AA being the way it is, I think it's a much more fair experience for everybody, for the CV player and for the surface ship player. You're going to shoot down some planes. The CV player is going to lose some planes, but probably get an okay drop off. But you can dodge and force the planes with a single squadron, again, to just sit in your AA for a longer period of time when you have only one squadron to worry about. If you have multiple squadrons to worry about, well, maneuvering isn't really going to help you because they'll just send squads around each side of you and just kill you outright. So pretty large change there, and I think new anti-aircraft is just far better than it just used to be. A much more fair and balanced experience overall. Spotting is something else I've seen about new CVs, and well, come on, there's literally only one squad compared to, well, in this case, you've got 6 squads you can put anywhere on the map, and some have more yet. So I think that's a pretty easy change to say this is a really good one. I think that new CVs don't have nearly the spotting impact that old CVs had. And it's something that creates more dynamic gameplay where you have to really consider where you want to... You have to really consider where you want to spot now. Whereas before, you could just kind of send your planes wherever and spot the entire map, and that's where it was. Now, something else people bring up is the damage output of CVs and how much damage they can do. Well, new CVs actually don't deal that much damage compared to old CVs, as you're going to see. We're barely into this game, and look at the damage number. It's a massive, massive, massive change. And they've cut down the damage, Wargaming has, of new CVs dramatically. And I think that creates a much more balanced experience. Now, this game that you're watching is not the typical old CV game, but it did happen more often than the way current CVs are, for sure. The other thing that I've seen people bring up is that CVs prevent flanking, and that creates a boring, stale game where everybody just sits in the middle of their spawn and that kind of thing, and that's it. Well, think about a game without CVs. Are they really that dynamic? I would argue no, they're actually not that dynamic. Cruisers sit on islands, destroyers poke at caps, and battleships sit at the back sniping at one another. Is that really that much different from a CV game? At least a CV is going to be spotting stuff, promoting people to not sit and camp on islands. That's a huge one. Cruisers can be pretty dang powerful if you just let them sit on an island and spam HE over them. CVs directly stop that kind of playstyle and help get the match moving quicker. That's going to be a big change. And that was old CVs and new CVs do that. And I think that's great that they carried that over from old CVs. Really, honestly, makes the game a lot more dynamic and fun. And I've seen, again, a different complaint I've seen about CVs. There's a lot of them. Is that people are actually complaining that they have to change the way they play when a CV is in the game. They're complaining that in a video game, they have to change the way they play. They're upset that there's a more diverse experience. There's more things to worry about. Wouldn't a more complex game be more interesting and more fun to play? More things to think about? Much more of a mental battle? I certainly think so. And I don't really understand why people would complain about that kind of stuff. It doesn't really make too much sense to me. Another thing I've seen is people comparing CVs to World of Tanks artillery. It's an interesting one. I haven't really played World of Tanks, so can't really comment as much about that. But I do know artillery can just sit at the back and change focus from side to side of the map very, very quickly. Whereas, especially new CVs, take a long time for their planes to get from one side of the map to the other. It's not this just instant turn a gun over and shoot, and then turn the gun to the other side and shoot. CVs definitely take a lot more time to gear up to strike the other side of the map. So, I don't think they're anywhere near as bad or oppressive. It takes a lot of skill to figure out where you're going to go strike, and it takes a lot of time to get there. Because your CV is often positioned somewhat centrally, sometimes you're off to the side, and sometimes you have to cut across the entire map to go strike the optimal target, that kind of thing. So definitely takes a lot of skill to figure out the right target to strike to help your team win. Another thing people bring up is the skill gap in CV players, and that because new CVs take less skill to do well in, that's somehow a bad thing, and that means that people are going to be taking more damage and it's going to be less fun to play. But that's crazy, because old CVs, the skill gap was so large between a good player and a bad player that oftentimes the game was entirely decided by the CV. If you had a good CV player, you would win most of the time. If you had a bad CV player, you would lose most of the time. And now that impact is far less. And it's more how good your entire team is, rather than just, okay, is our CV going to crush the enemy team or not, right? That's not very fun for anybody. So new CVs, definitely a great change in that department. Now, a really weird one is people complain that CV players play in like a scummy way. That's not that reasonable, I'd say. People they're just playing the game, man. Like, and besides, even if you are getting focused a little bit more by a CV, it's way easier to endure that now than previously. Look at how many squads there were, and look at how much damage it deals. It's massive, 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 massive damage. Yeah, as we discussed earlier, the single squad is easier to dodge, and it deals less damage overall compared to old CVs. Old CVs are crazy, man. As you can see, they're crazy. But even then, they probably should be in the game still, because it's a naval action game. And are you really going to have a naval game without aircraft carriers? They're a crucial part of history, and definitely changed the way war was fought on the seas. And you're really going to make a game without them? I don't think that makes a lot of sense, because you're going to drive players away who see that and think, well, why aren't carriers there? They're a big part of history. And why would I play a game it's an arcade game, sure, but why would you play a game that's somewhat based in history that doesn't really include an entire massive class of the entire naval combat tree, right? They got to be in the game. It just makes sense. So I think that saying that they shouldn't be in the game, that the historical argument shouldn't be considered, is kind of silly, honestly. And this is a fun one. People showing wargaming charts trying to say that new carriers are so much worse for the game. If they would read the charts properly, the charts clearly show how much better old aircraft carriers were compared to new aircraft carriers on battle influence, and they show how massive the skill gap was between the really good players and the really bad players, and how much better they've done at making the really good players slightly less impactful and making the bad players more impactful, meaning CVs aren't dominating the game and making it so your team wins or loses based on one player in a 12v12 match. Really good change. Really, really, really good change. So, honestly, the CVs are just way, way, way better now than they were in the past, and are a very interesting, dynamic part of any respectable naval action game. Every good naval action game is gonna have aircraft carriers in it, alright? They're just there, okay? And they provide actually a very different gameplay style to break up some of the monotony of surface ships that can kind of feel a little bit samey. And I definitely recommend you guys try new CVs, because this game can get kind of stale and boring when everybody does the same thing, where it's like 2 to 5 minutes at the beginning of the battle when there's nothing going on and you have nothing to do other than sail into position, which isn't all that fun or action oriented. I think if you want to try something new and maybe play a little bit more fast paced, I would say carrier would be a great option for you. I think you'd have a pretty good time with that. So that's kind of my response video and to some of these complaints that people have been having about carriers. And yeah, let me know if you agree with what I had to say in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I'm glad I was able to put this video out for you guys. Hopefully it makes you think a little bit more about things, and enjoy your April 1st.